Picture this. You see something so evil at 12 years old that your entire life bends around it. Not in a poetic way, in a, well, now I can never be normal again way. Because that's the thing about witnessing cruelty up close. It doesn't always make you kinder. Sometimes it just gives your anger a religion. And today, we're talking about people who looked at the law, looked at evil, looked at the giant useless machine in the middle, and decided, no, I'll handle it myself. Which is usually how history gets interesting, and how bodies start dropping. Let's begin with a man who saw slavery, decided America was infested with it, and concluded the cure was blood. Very normal response, very stable, very 1800s. You're 12. You've just driven cattle more than 100 miles, which is impressive, also miserable. Also proof that children in the 1800s were basically unpaid contractors with no union.
Come on in, John.
A U.S. Marshal invites you into his house. He seems kind, friendly, proud of you even.
That was a brave thing.
Inside, you meet another boy, about your age, worn clothes, quiet smile. The kind of kid who seems nice, but careful, like life already taught him that being noticed can be dangerous.
He warms up, gives you small things he made by hand. For a few hours, it feels normal. Then dinner ends. The guests leave. The front door shuts, and the real house appears. The marshal turns on the other boy for mistakes during dinner service. Not a scolding, not discipline. Not one angry slap and then done. He grabs an iron shovel and starts beating him with it. Again, again, again. You hear metal hit bone. You smell blood. You stand there useless. And in that moment, before politics, before ideology, before speeches, you learn something much more important. Evil is often ordinary. It eats dinner first. It smiles in public. Then it closes the door. That boy was John Brown, and the scene never left him. Because once you watch a child get beaten, like an object, slavery stops sounding like a debate. Now it's machinery. A legal machine built to turn cruelty into routine. And once you see that machine up close, you stop asking whether it exists. You start wondering how to break it.
Brown grows up. He moves, fails in business, starts over, fails again, has a huge family, helps escaped slaves, works with the Underground Railroad, treats black people and Native Americans with more dignity than much of white America could manage at the time, which, to be fair, was not exactly an elite moral competition. But here's where things get dangerous. Hatred of evil sounds noble, and sometimes it is, until it stops being moral clarity and becomes obsession. Brown watches the country keep protecting slavery, compromises, court decisions, cowardly laws, then the Fugitive Slave Act, which basically told the nation that even free states were expected to help return human beings like lost property. Brown looks at peaceful abolitionists and starts thinking they are trying to fight a rabid wolf with pamphlets and polite applause. So he arms men, because he no longer believes evil can be persuaded, only resisted. And if persuasion fails long enough, some people stop trying to convince the world. They start trying to wound it.
Then Kansas happens. And Kansas, at that point, was basically America running a Civil War rehearsal, with worse organization and even more delusion. Pro-slavery settlers, anti-slavery settlers, fraud, raids, threats, men showing up armed because apparently voting was too boring with the possibility of homicide. Brown's sons are there. They ask him to come. Eventually he does. And he does not arrive with calming energy. He arrives with rifles, pistols, and swords. Then everything blows open. An anti-slavery town is sacked, a U.S. senator is beaten on the Senate floor, and Brown decides the age of speeches is over. So one night, he and his men drag pro-slavery settlers from their homes and hack them to death with broadswords. Then Brown shoots one in the head to make sure the job is finished. And there's the line. The moment a man goes from enemy of evil to self-appointed instrument of judgment. Quick PSA. If you ever start thinking, maybe God wants me specifically to kill people for the greater good, slow down. Drink water. Sit down. Maybe call literally anyone. That thought has a terrible historical batting average.
Kansas sinks deeper into bloodshed. Brown becomes famous, or infamous. Depends whether you thought slavery was a moral abomination or a pretty solid business plan. But even that is not enough for him. Now he wants ignition. He believes that if he seizes a federal armory, arms enslaved people, and starts a revolt, the whole slave system can be broken open at once. This becomes the Harper's Ferry plan. Frederick Douglass hears it and tells him it's suicide. Brown hears that with the calm confidence of a man who has already promoted himself from activist to prophecy. So in 1859, Brown and his raiders seize the armory. They cut telegraph lines, take hostages, grab weapons. For one brief second, it looks historic. It is, just not in the way he wanted, because the uprising never comes. Instead, local militias show up, then U.S. Marines, then Robert E. Lee, which is generally a terrible sign that your plan may have had a structural weakness or 12. Brown is trapped. Gunfire, chaos, dead sons, dead followers. He is wounded, captured, tried, and condemned.
At trial, Brown does not beg. He talks like a man who believes the court is temporary and history is the real jury. Then he is hanged. And before he dies, he leaves behind a thought dark enough to outlive him. That the crimes of the land would not be purged away without blood. And the worst part, he was right. A little over a year later, the Civil War begins. Hundreds of thousands die. Slavery ends. America tears itself open. So what was John Brown? Hero? Fanatic? Prophet? Murderer? Probably all of the above. He saw evil clearly, fought it sincerely, and then got violent enough to become part of the same nightmare he wanted to destroy. That was story one. An ideology, a wound, a man who decided blood was the only language left. Now let's move to something smaller, and somehow worse. Because story two is not about a nation, it's about one family, one boy, one father. In the moment, private pain becomes public execution.
Picture this. You're a father. Your son has a karate instructor. Young guy. Friendly. Seems decent. Seems trustworthy. Seems like someone life has been rough on. You feel bad for him. That was mistake number one. You let him around the family. Invite him over. Feed him. Let him stay over sometimes. Your son likes him. Looks up to him. And that right there is how predators work. Not with horns, not with creepy music, not with a sign around the neck that says, "Future court exhibit." They show up normal, helpful, patient, safe-looking. That's how they get close enough. Gary Poche believed Jeffrey Doucet was safe, a family friend, a role model, a person worth helping. Then one day, Doucet borrows the family car and asks to take Gary's 10-year-old son with him. Nothing about it feels urgent. Nothing feels wrong. Until they don't come back. Now the clock starts. Hours pass. Then a day. Then more. Police search. No sign of them. And this is where the human brain becomes its own torture device. Because when someone you love disappears, your imagination stops being a tool. It becomes a weapon.
Then a call. California. The boy is alive. Police trace the motel, storm in, find Doucet with him, arrest him. For 1 second, this looks like the rescue. Then comes the medical exam. And suddenly rescue is not the right word anymore. Because the exam reveals what had really been happening. The boy had been abused, not once, for over a year. And he stayed quiet because he did not want to lose his friend. That sentence alone can ruin a person. Because now Gary is not just angry, he is guilty. He brought this man in, trusted him, opened the door. And guilt, when mixed with rage, turns into something very hard to reason with. Doucet is charged, held in California, waiting to be flown back to Louisiana for trial. But Gary keeps drinking, keeps replaying it, keeps spiraling. And the law starts to feel too slow, too careful, too civilized. Then he learns the flight number and the arrival date, which is the kind of information that becomes extremely dangerous inside the wrong mind on the wrong day.
On March 16th, Gary goes to the airport wearing a hat and sunglasses. He waits near the payphones, calls a friend. As police escort Doucet through the terminal, Gary says, "You're about to hear a shot." Then he turns, pulls a revolver, and fires once into Doucet's head. In front of police, in front of cameras, in public. Not a breakdown, an execution. And this is where the story becomes morally radioactive. Because people understood. That does not make it lawful. It makes it relatable, which is worse. The footage spreads. America watches a father kill the man accused of destroying his child. And suddenly everyone is staring at the same forbidden question. Would I have done the same thing? Careful with that question. Because revenge gets its power from feeling emotionally obvious. Gary is charged, but he does not go to prison. He takes a plea deal, gets a suspended sentence, probation, and community service. Legally, that's mercy. Emotionally, that fixes nothing. His son is still hurt. The family is still altered. The trust is still dead. Gary got revenge. He did not get restoration. And that's the scam revenge always sells. It promises closure. Usually, it just widens the crater.
Not ideology. Not revolution. Just private pain turning into public execution. Now let's scale this all the way up. Because story 3 is what happens when it is not one man snapping. It is an entire city deciding the law is too weak, too corrupt, or too useless to matter. Picture this. Gold is discovered, and everybody loses their mind. Men flood into California chasing money. Cities swell overnight. Crime explodes. Government falls behind. Suddenly you live in a place where thieves, arsonists, murderers, and corrupt officials all seem to be working the same shift. That was San Francisco. It grew too fast. The police couldn't keep up. Gangs thrived. The Sydney Ducks set fires, looted buildings, killed people, and bribed their way around consequences. Which is a good reminder that when institutions are weak, organized criminals become very creative. A businessman named Sam Brannan watches the chaos grow. Yes, that Sam Brannan. The same guy who got rich off the gold rush by hyping the rush and selling tools at insane markups to the people chasing it. So let's not pretend he floated in from heaven wrapped in civic purity.
But even Brannan has a limit. After fires and crime spiral, he gathers businessmen and citizens and helps form the Committee of Vigilance in 1851, which sounds noble. And sometimes it was. And sometimes it was just mob justice with better marketing. The committee moves fast. A thief steals a safe. They catch him, try him publicly, hang him, and people cheer. Why? Because when official systems fail long enough, even brutality starts looking efficient. The committee swells into the hundreds. They hunt criminals, execute some, deport others. Crime drops. People feel safer. They disband. So, problem solved? Of course not. By 1855, San Francisco is corrupt again. Only now, the criminals wear suits. Officials, power brokers, connected elites, men who commit crimes politely and call it governance. A newspaper publisher named James King of William starts exposing them. One corrupt official, then another. Eventually, one of the men he exposes, James Casey, shoots him in the street. That was enough. Crowds gather, anger spikes, and the second Committee of Vigilance forms, bigger and bolder than the first.
They drag Casey and another man from jail, hang them publicly. Then they move through the city like a parallel government with ropes, guns, and public approval. They raid buildings, seize evidence, expose rigged ballots, pressure officials to resign, take prisoners, reshape power. And that is where democracy should panic. Not when corruption exists. When ordinary people become so disgusted by corruption that extra legal force starts feeling cleaner than law. Because once that happens, you are no longer repairing the system. You are replacing it with rage and whoever happens to be armed. Which can work, briefly. That's why it's seductive. So what do these three stories actually tell you? A boy sees cruelty.
and spends the rest of his life trying to make evil bleed. A father loses faith in the courts and turns an airport into an execution site. A city gets so sick of corruption, it decides due process is optional. Different scale, same mutation. Pain becomes permission. And that's the real danger. The second you decide your suffering gives you special clearance to become judge, jury, and final answer, you are one bad step away from becoming the next warning story. You might hit the guilty. You might even hit the right target. But the second blood starts feeling efficient, you are no longer defeating the darkness. You are proving it scales.